I know tier lists are crap, and I know that it's almost impossible to be objective. That's why I took a different approach. I created this spreadsheet with all the possible weapon combinations and 7 important metrics. Then I sent this spreadsheet to several veteran players and experienced guild members on their respective main weapons, as well as few of my Tron and Liberty friends, to also get data from a casual player perspective. After they would fill out the spreadsheet, an average number from 1 to 5 would appear in the last column, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst. Then I analyzed their inputs, took their average result for each build, and ran another average formula to get the final tier list. This way I ensured that subjective opinions of individuals would not have a high impact on the final result, as I had around 15 to 20 players participate, all having different knowledge and experience with the game. I don't want to bore you too much with the numbers, formulas and details, so I created this simple tier list design that is easy to understand. Before going into it, a quick disclaimer. This tier list is only for overall PvE content, with maxed out best in slot gear and skills. The weapons on the left side indicated a weapon that is out in your main hand, while the top side is the offhand weapon. For example, Longbow plus Dagger would not have the same build and playstyle as Dagger plus Longbow. One is holding a Longbow and using range to attack, while the other is holding a Dagger and staying in melee range. Many more weapon combinations are like this. Just keep in mind that the left side are the weapons you want to hold out in your hands for 95% of the fights, otherwise this tier list won't make any sense. I also won't be including 2 of the same weapons, as it's not viable and would require a lot of knowledge and skill to successfully pull off. Crossbow Dagger is the absolute bread and butter when it comes to high single target damage burst and a well-rounded sustained damage during long boss fights. It pairs well with passives and mobility the Dagger provides. Heal specialization made it even stronger, and it's one of the most popular weapon combinations in the game. It rightfully goes into S tier. Crossbow plus Greatsword does provide high damage, mobility, hit and defensive stats, but it simply cannot compare to the high damage burst other weapon combinations provide, since Dagger offers more valuable passives than Greatsword as an offhand weapon when it comes to pure damage. Only due to Crossbow on its own pulling high damage numbers, it goes into B tier. Crossbow Longbow is the same boat as Greatsword. It doesn't offer as high damage as previous 2 offhands, but it holds really well against single target opponents. The playstyle and passives counteract each other, where Crossbow requires mobility and mid-range, Longbow prefers stationary or long-range playstyle. Just cause Crossbow on its own is capable of doing high numbers, in combination with few crit passives from Longbow, it goes into B tier. Crossbow's staff is very similar to Longbow offhand. Both weapons individually offer a high damage, but they don't really do anything to complement one another. The difference in range, where the crossbow is mid-range, mobility weapon, and staff being long-range casting, could become difficult to manage if you're a beginner. But just due to sheer amount of damage and AoE capabilities staff provide, it is going in A tier. Crossbow and Sword and Shield offers needed protection and defense, but it simply falls short in terms of damage compared to other offhand weapons, and is by far the worst melee offhand for it. It's not even good enough to be considered as a tank. With that said, it goes into C tier. Crossbow wand combination counters itself, as the wand relies on damage over time, while crossbow relies on quick bursts of damage. It can be difficult to keep on top of the cooldowns which cut deeply into your DPS, and the healing capabilities of wand do not make it a great healer. Just because it has a decent group and AoE capabilities, it goes into B tier. Dagger Crossbow runs the same build as Crossbow Dagger. It doesn't matter if you have Dagger out, as it gives you mobility, and Crossbow DPS is the same in melee range. It goes into S tier. Dagger Greatsword is the second best weapon combination where you can have a dagger out and not use it as an offhand. It is the best melee oriented DPS build with high bursts, mobility and survivability. Just cause damage can't compare with other S tier builds, and due to its melee nature, it goes into A tier. Dagger plus Longbow, Staff, Sword and Shield and Wand should not be used with the intention of having Dagger out as main weapon and forcing yourself into melee range with ranged weapons. Dagger is amazing as an offhand weapon and is very good with all 4 weapons due to passives and mobility. All 4 of these weapon combinations should not be used in any PvE content, and all 4 are going into C tier. Greatsword Crossbow is another instance where Crossbow as an offhand weapon is really strong and it pairs well with a melee weapon that offers high burst damage, survivability and mobility. The build is the same as Crossbow Greatsword, so it goes into B tier. Greatsword Dagger is the same as Dagger Greatsword. The best melee oriented weapon combination with a high burst damage, high mobility and attack speed. It doesn't really matter which weapon is out in your main hand as it almost does the same job. With this said, it goes into A tier. Greatsword plus Longbow, Staff and Wand fails to provide anything relevant to the three long-range weapons. They don't work together due to Greatsword forcing you into melee, which would significantly hinder your damage output. This is why all three weapon combinations are going into C tier. Greatsword plus Sword and Shield is the ultimate tank weapon combination. It offers instant queue into dungeons, allows you to be invited for any type of PvE content, and it's very much needed core part of any group activity. It goes without even mentioning everything this weapon combination does to make you an unkillable fortress, so it rightfully goes into S tier. Simply put, no tanks, no dungeons for you. Longbow Crossbow works the same counterintuitive way as Crossbow Longbow. Due to the nature of both weapons' passives and specific playstyle, it's not as easy to pull off consistently and maximize damage output. Just because a crossbow as an individual weapon is very strong, this goes into A tier. Longbow Dagger falls behind in damage against crossbow offhand, but the dagger provides a very much needed mobility and passives. With a good build, specific playstyle and best in slot gear, it can achieve close to S tier single target damage output, but due to lacking in AoE capabilities and a slow group farming, it goes into A tier. Longbow Greatsword simply does not work as Greatsword cannot provide anything needed to justify running a melee offhand weapon over Dagger. Forcing you to go into melee without complementing it with mobility skills isn't great use of the long range Longbow provides. It goes into C tier. Longbow Staff is the ultimate fully long range weapon combination that offers very high damage output, AoE capabilities and single target burst. It remains almost on par with any damage crossbow can output, and with almost unlimited mana, relatively short cooldowns, you can spam every damaging skill until the boss is dead. Longbow Staff with best in slot gear and extreme endgame can reach up to 35 meter in range. It rightfully goes into S tier. Longbow Sword and Shield does not work in the same way as Greatsword doesn't as an offhand weapon. It doesn't have any capabilities of tanking with a long range weapon in hand, and going melee completely defeats the purpose of having a long range weapon in the first place. It goes into C tier. Longbow Wand with the new skill specialization has been turned into an ultimate healing build. It is actually absurd how much burst healing and healing over time it can dish out to multiple targets. It also offers additional healing support and utility skills if properly specced into, making it a very much needed healer for any type of PvE content. It goes into S tier. Remember, no healer, no dungeon. Staff Crossbow is very similar to Crossbow Staff. Both weapons individually offer a high damage, but they don't really do anything to complement one another. The difference in range where the crossbow is mid-range mobility weapon and staff being a long-range casting weapon could become difficult to manage if you're a beginner. But just due to sheer amount of damage and AoE capabilities the crossbow provides, it goes into A tier. Staff Dagger is probably the most popular weapon combination in the game. It is almost on par with damage compared to crossbow. It has bigger range, more AoE capabilities, almost unlimited mana, and a needed mobility, which paired with dagger passives is absolutely devastating to any target. Simple rotations and easy to understand build makes it one of the best DPS weapon combinations for any type of PvE content. It goes into S tier. Staff Greatsword simply does not work as Greatsword cannot provide anything needed to justify running a melee offhand weapon over dagger. Forcing you to go into melee without complementing it with mobility skills isn't great use of the long range staff provides. It goes into C tier. Staff Longbow is the same as Longbow Staff. It is the ultimate fully long range weapon combination that offers very high damage output, AoE capabilities and single target burst. It remains almost on par with any damage crossbow can output, and with almost unlimited mana, relatively short cooldowns, you can spam every damaging skill until the boss is dead. With best in slot gear in extreme endgame can reach up to 35 meters in range. It rightfully goes into S tier. Staff plus Sword and Shield does not work in the same way as Greatsword doesn't as an offhand weapon. It doesn't have any capabilities of tanking with a long range weapon in hand, and going completely melee defeats the purpose of having a long range weapon in the first place. It goes into C tier. Staff Wand can be run as a main and secondary healer. The build can spec into both full healer and a DPS build with some healing. It has great capabilities for group content and AoE farming, as both weapons offer high AoE damage. It is the classic mage class where both weapons use magic and elemental skills, so you can fulfill your desires of being a DPS mage or a healer mage. Due to versatility in healing and DPS, it goes into S tier. Sword and Shield plus Crossbow, Longbow and Staff simply does not work. If you are going to take Sword and Shield as a main weapon, it is expected of you to tank, and none of the three weapons as offhand work for tanking. They don't complement what Sword and Shield offers, and the damage is not good. You don't have any synergies, you're not a tank, and you're not dealing damage. All three are going into C tier. Sword and Shield plus Dagger does work very nicely to the point where you can actually tank with it, but also deal quite a decent damage due to Dagger passives and damaging skills. Just cause it is not a pure unkillable tank, it goes into A tier. Sword and Shield plus Greatsword is the ultimate tank weapon combination. It offers instant queue into dungeons, allows you to be invited for any type of PvE content, and it's a very much needed core part of any group activity. It goes without even mentioning everything this weapon combination does to make you an unkillable fortress, so it rightfully goes into S tier. Simply put, no tanks, no dungeons for you. Sword and Shield plus Wand is what many players are calling the Paladin build. It's probably the best tanking weapon combination, as you're a tank that can heal itself, but also heal other players and provide support. It has been popularized recently, and with skill specializations, best in slot gear and high level skills, the Paladin can literally solo any endgame boss in any dungeon. As Paladin is both a tank and a healer and can queue for both slots as any other tank or healer, it deserves an S tier. If there was an SS tier, I would put Paladin there, alone. Wand plus Crossbow combination counters itself, as the Wand relies on damage over time, while the Crossbow relies on quick bursts of damage. It can be difficult to keep on top of the cooldowns, which cut deeply into your DPS. You can go full healer build, and going full DPS build isn't sufficient, and there are better options out there. It goes into C tier. Wand Dagger combination is great for AoE farming and killing large amounts of mobs with minimal effort. Going full healer with this combination is possible, as heals can crit, but it is mostly used for DPS. Although damage is nowhere near the best S tier damage dealing combinations, so with the versatility to also go support healer with a DPS build puts it into B tier. Wand Greatsword combination is not good, as sadly the Greatsword fails to provide anything of value to a healing type weapon like the Wand. If you intend to play the damage side of the Wand, you will find yourself struggling in applying damage. Plus, being forced to move from melee into range doesn't work well and isn't efficient. It goes into C tier. Wand plus Longbow and Staff are the main healing combinations and should not be spec'd into too much damage. New Longbow healing skills and specialization allow this combination to excel in healing as well as provide a decent damage output, while the Staff combination was the standard mage healer build, which holds even better in terms of healing and damage output after skill specializations. You simply cannot do dungeons without healers, so both of these combinations are S tier. Wand plus Sword and Shield could also be called the Paladin build, but more on the healing side rather than the tanking side, due to Wand being out in the main hand and staying range, which doesn't really do much in terms of tanking, as you want Sword and Shield for all main tanking purposes. With being limited to tanking by range and healing output not being as good as Staff or Longbow offhand, this combination goes into B tier. Here is the summary of all the meta combinations that are considered S and A tier. And here are all the B tier combinations that can be really strong in the hand of a good player, but could become a problem for the beginners. Rest of the combinations are not worth investing time and resources into, as you will only get disappointed with their underwhelming performance. But who am I to tell you what to play? Don't be a sheep, don't be a meta slave, and at the end of the day play whatever you want and whatever is most fun for you. Who knows, maybe you create a new meta weapon combination. If you made it this far, you have to subscribe, as I will have a PvP tier list uploaded in the next few days. Also, consider watching some of my other videos appearing on your screen.